Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, mysterious voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the strange and unusual literature that I found in my travels. However, we have neared the end of July, and so I don't want to talk about a specific book, but rather the multiple books that I read in July. But not just July either. I'm also going to talk about June, as I didn't do a TBR or wrap up, mainly because I was still in the process of settling after my move, and I just didn't feel like doing a TBR or wrap up for for June when I didn't read a lot in June, and I didn't know how much I was going to read in July. But now it appears that I'm back in the full swing of things. Probably not reading as much as I did when I lived in Washington, but I think that's just because I worked, the grave shift in Washington, and I had plenty of time to read, and now I have a different kind of job in California, and it's occupying a lot of my time. But I still make time for reading because reading is fun. This video is going to be a June and July wrap up, and then in August TBR. I have a lot of exciting books to read in August. A lot of things I want to get to, or that I've been putting off, and we'll see how far I make it. If I'm able to read everything that I want to read. But some other good news is that I've on my goal for this year was 60 books, and so I'm at 40 right now. At least what I've counted on Goodreads. I counted the books that I mainly talked about on this channel. There are a bunch of other books that I did read, but I didn't count on Goodreads, and that includes short stories. So I might have surpassed 60 at this point. But the books that I've actually counted, I'm at 40. So take that what you will. But I'm 20 books away from my goal, and it appears there is enough time left. There's 5 months, so that would be an average of 4 books per month. And if I'm reading comic books, I'll no doubt make it. And not to say that I'm padding out my reading goal with comic books, but comic books are a lot of fun. So I'm keeping track of that. And so without further ado, let's talk about the wrap-up, and then we'll move on to the TBR. Let's go. So in June and July, what did I actually read? Well, one of the books I read was Hood Feminism by Mickey Kendall, a pretty solid book, really eye-opening in terms of understanding what women of color, especially Black women, experience in their everyday lives, and the oppression that makes it difficult for them to really overcome that oppression or even make a living in America. This isn't anything particularly new, especially we've been hearing it a lot on the news recently. And it's often the case that when Black men die through police violence or anything like that, Black women are left to protest the police violence or whatever systemic oppression is in the way. And something I don't think Mickey Kendall talks about, maybe she does, but not in too much detail, is how Black women, because of all the stress in their lives, they tend to die a lot younger because of the stress, of the pain of feeling like you have no control over anything. So there's a lot going on there, and I really think it's an important read. That's going to be a definitely must check out if you're considering reading anything that I've talked about on this channel. I also read Forever Princess by Meg Cabot. It was terrible. It shows that Meg Cabot, isn't willing to challenge her readers, at least in the young adult fiction she's writing. Maybe it's different in the more adult romance that she's writing. But, if she can't even write fiction for children, what does that say about her other work? That's that's my main point that I'm trying to get out there. I also read Being Human by Judy Heumann and Christian Joyner. I thought it was really great, possibly one of the best books that I read this year. And it also, inspired me and gave me a lot to think about going forward with my work with accessibility and disability services in higher education. So I'm going to take that with me, and it's a very solid read. I feel like everyone out there who's listening should probably seek that book out, because I'm sure you don't know a lot about the disability civil rights movement, which is currently still ongoing, unless you were involved in the disability civil rights movement yourself. But I don't think many of my viewers were involved in that. So I'm just going to say definitely seek that book out, as it contains valuable information that you might not know. I also read The Kindly Ones, the 9th volume of the Sandman series by Neil Gaiman. I thought it was largely disappointing. I expected a lot more out of Neil Gaiman with this series, and my main issue is that it just kind of meanders. There's a lot of characters, and it goes nowhere with those characters. And then the ending was very vague, when I thought maybe Neil Gaiman was going to do something a bit more solid, and unfortunately he did not. I'm still going to try to read the rest of the volumes that remain in this series, but I don't have high hopes anymore. I keep getting disappointed by Neil Gaiman, but at the same time, when he fails hard, but when he does great, it's like one of the top pieces of literature in modern times. So I guess you're really rolling the dice when you pick up a Neil Gaiman book. I also read Batman R.I.P. by Grant Morrison, which I thought was so-so. My main problem with it was the very weak villains that Batman was coming up against. It introduced a lot of interesting ideas, such as people actually calling Batman out on the mental health issues that he's facing, or the idea of Batman of Zur-En-Arrh, where Batman or Bruce Wayne has to create a separate identity in order to overcome the psychological attacks that he might be facing. I thought that was interesting. I don't think Grant Morrison necessarily succeeds in pulling it all together, and so it was one of the more disappointing entries in the Batman canon. But I'm still sold on the work that Grant Morrison does, so I want to check out more work from them in the future. I also read a number of short stories. The Last Words of Benito Piccone, which I thought was pretty good. The Dog by Cesar Ira, which, if you read one short story from this video today, let it be this one. The Dog by Cesar Ira was very weird, very unusual, but I love how Cesar Ira tells a story of a person realizing that their past is coming back to haunt them, maybe in the form of a dog they may or may not have abused, but which seems small, but the past, something as inconsequential as that is still coming back to haunt the character. And so I thought it was really, really funny and really weird, and definitely a fun read. And I think you should probably seek it out if you want to read something a bit different with your short stories. And then I read The Birds by Daphne du Maurier, which I thought was pretty good. I can see why Hitchcock was attracted to that short story and wanted to adapt it into a movie. And I think the movie and the short story are on the same level in terms of the tension and fear that they offer, with the book being, or the short story being very, very spooky, and the family in the short story wondering, are we going to survive? Are the birds going to get us? Why are they attacking? Whole lot of questions that Daphne du Maurier is very skilled at exploring there. I also read Bobcat by Rebecca Lee, which I thought was fine. I find myself thinking about it less and less as the weeks go by. So maybe another one of those forgettable short stories that I've encountered. That might have been okay when I first read it, but it doesn't stick in the mind, unfortunately. But that's what's going to happen when there's thousands of short stories published. Some of them don't really stick with you, and that's just the way it goes. I also read Huddling Place, which I thought was pretty decent science fiction. I really liked how the author, whose name I forget, but I'll put it up here somewhere. I really like how they explored like how how the futuristic technology wasn't necessarily making our lives better, but it was inducing panic attacks and distancing people from one another, and how the author managed to say all this without coming across like a crotchety old man saying, "Oh, those cell phones will be the death of us." No, he has very real concerns about this technology, and he talks about it in a very compelling way, which I think is worth looking at. And then the last thing that I read in June and July was a bunch of poetry, slowly but surely making Poetry Thursday come back on the regular. So be sure to go check out my Poetry Thursday videos, which I think is on a specific channel that you can find when you look at my videos. What do I want to read for August? Well, I have a number of books planned. I have Birth of the Demon here, but I actually read that in July. I wasn't planning on reading that until August rolled around, but I got to it sooner and finished it a bit quicker, which I really did enjoy. Especially the final comic in the collection, Birth of the Demon, as opposed to Son of the Demon and Bride of the Demon, which weren't that great, but still worth exploring for Birth of the Demon, which has wonderful art and a compelling story to it. But I also want to read Marvel 1602. I actually picked it up from my local library, and I'll be reading it very soon. For those that don't know, Marvel 1602 is the sort of what if story that takes place in the colonial era, or in England, and it's also by Neil Gaiman, another Neil Gaiman story. I've heard good things about it, but I'll be the judge of whether it fully delivers, and I'm really hoping that this is one of the better Neil Gaiman stories that I'll be encountering. I also want to read a number of other comic books, maybe exploring Marvel, maybe Iron Man. I know that the library that I've been going to, don't forget to patronize your local libraries, but I know that the library has a lot of graphic novels. So maybe I want to explore Iron Man or Marvel stories. But I also want to get to Son of Batman. I really want to round out the Damian Wayne storyline, because I've been reading Batman R.I.P. and Birth of the Demon and Batman and Son, all revolving around Damian Wayne. But I really want to find out what happens when they fully introduce him and how Batman reacts. Something very interesting about this, it is a Grant Morrison story, so a lot of high hopes with Grant Morrison. And although maybe not everything Grant Morrison writes holds up, they do have an interesting way of exploring Batman's psyche and a number of other themes. So I'm looking forward to Batman and Son, regardless of the overall enjoyment that I might get out of it. I also have a number of novels that I plan on reading for August, including The Octopus by Frank Norris, which I checked out from my local library. It was a random pick out, but apparently it has something to do with a labor strike and the government coming into conflict with a union in the 1800s. And so that definitely has indubious battle vibes to it. I'm really hoping this does have a John Steinbeckian flavor to it, as that's one of my favorite authors, and if we can channel that into other writers, I would be most thrilled about that. I also want to read Beauty by Robin McKinley, which is a sort of a romance story. One of my friends suggested that I read it, and I'm all about those book recommendations. So, maybe not something that's in my usual wheelhouse of what I seek out in books, but I'm always up for something different, something to get me out of maybe this mindset of what I should be reading. And so be on the lookout for that, unless it's really awful, in which case I probably won't be talking about it on this channel. And then I also want to read Indian Horse, which is for the book club that I'll be doing. We're reading about an indigenous man in Canada who goes through the reservation system and also becomes a sports star down the road. It should be pretty exciting. And then there are a number of other short stories, or not short stories, but novels that I want to read. I want to eventually get to Dune, just because it's been on my list for 2021, but I haven't had a chance to really get to it. But so maybe in August or in September. I definitely want to read it. Maybe before the movie comes out later this year, just so I can read it and then watch it, because it has a lot of hype associated with it. I'm going to read short stories for Short Story Tuesday in August. I don't have anything specific planned, but I do want to read another Ursula Guin short story, as I think it's time to return to Ursula Le Guin. She did a great job with The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas, and I really, really, really enjoyed The Wizard of Earthsea. So before I get to the sequel to that book, I want to read one of her short stories, and hopefully it'll be pretty solid. And then I also plan on reading a number of poems for August, including one by Joy Harjo, which you may recall last year I had read one of her poems too. Really solid poet, like maybe one of my favorite modern poets. So be on the lookout for that. It should be a great time. Those are my thoughts on the wrap-up and TBR video. A lot of good books that I've read in June and July, and a lot great things planned for August. If you have something specific to suggest that you think I might enjoy, or that might be a little bit weird and up my alley, feel free to recommend it in the comments below. Let's have a discussion about books. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about this humble booktube channel. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and dog days of summer travels. Farewell.